It seems like every week we see a new variant of Mirai, but this week it's on Linux servers.
So Joe, looks like Mirai is never going to die, right? It looks like it's targeting Linux servers now?
Yeah, so we're seeing a vulnerability with Yarn, which is Hadoop's orchestrator, that's allowing attackers to get a Mirai variant payload onto unpatched Linux servers. So basically, the REST API that Yarn uses has a known command injection vulnerability, and that's being used to attack these Linux servers through the Yarn interface and install Mirai payloads. So whether it's VPN filter, some variant of the Mirai payload, and then it's a little unique. It's unique because it's not an IoT device.
So this is sort of a way of creating a more powerful Mirai node that has the ability to scan faster. It doesn't actually appear to infect other nodes, but it reports its scanning results back to somebody else who I can only assume is using it for further infection.
It's also doing a unique thing where it's not worming. Mirai, we're used to it getting on one IoT device, and that IoT device starts looking on Telnet for the next bot to recruit. But this actually, it's installed by the attacker themselves. So, the research from NetScout, they found that in their honeypot that only a small number of sources were actually found looking for this vulnerability. So probably the way they see it is that the attackers were installing it and then pulling back the information for the vulnerable server, and then it would do a full install from the source. So not worming out like typical IoT botnet would.
Mm-hmm. And you and I looked at the flows that we have for this particular report, this Yarn.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like there's very many sources. In fact, maybe a handful, maybe like 5 at the most.
Yeah, that's what we see there. The researchers saw it. It started in September. So the original attack vector, the command injection, it scaled up to like 70 sources, but nothing in the scale that we're usually seeing.
Right. And when you see Mirai, typically when it worms out, it starts going up exponentially as more and more boxes get infected.
A Linux server Mirai bot is a lot more powerful than an IoT device Mirai bot. So, the possibility of a server strength Mirai botnet is pretty intimidating.
And typically when we're talking about servers, if it's in a server farm somewhere, they've got access to more bandwidth than, say, your average home DVR or router or something like that.
Absolutely. I mean, you would hope, one thing we always talk about IoT devices is they're less known, right? Your refrigerator, nobody's logging into your refrigerator every day.
I'm logging into your refrigerator every day.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about.
But a Linux server, a Hadoop cluster, and hopefully you would say there's a little more oversight. There's an administrator for the cluster, there's maybe some probing, alarming, alerting on. So, you'd hope that would limit the exposure, that maybe these aren't going to be bots that live as long as an IoT device who may never get patched, right?
That's a good point.
So, it's probably a more powerful bot, but it may be a less, sneaky bot.
So if there's no propagation on this, then this is more targeted.
It sounds like, from what you said, that this particular version of Mirai is being spread through the Yarn vulnerability, getting installed on an x86 server, but then going ahead and trying to brute force on Telnet. So it itself is spreading, the original version of Mirai, an earlier one that is still IoT?
I think it's going from this Linux server and then out to other Linux servers.
Okay. So then it is kind of still worming.
So it is still,
but except it's using a different mechanism than the original.
But it doesn't. It goes and looks for it and then reports it back. It doesn't do
So
the
it's
install.
only for scanning. So there may be other propagation going on, but just not from this guy.
Well, it's propagating the information and then reporting back, but
so
all the installation still comes from...
The bot commander would have to make a decision on whether the bot actually takes over the next server.
Right.
That, or it may be happening out of band of the server entirely.
Right.
Yeah. Just reporting the scan results and somebody else is popping it. The other thing to mention that I think is important here is that Mirai, the source code was released.
Right.
So that's when we talk about Mirai, we're not necessarily talking about the same actors every single time. We could be talking about completely different folks every single time.
Yeah.
But that's also a reason we probably see so many interesting variants of it, is because everybody is trying to customize it to their own needs.
Yeah, it seems like every, at least once a month, we're probably talking about on this show the newest variant out there.
Mirai or Satori or something else with a different name,
Patching is key with these types of botnets. Is that you have to ensure that your Linux server A is patched, to the latest revisions, and then ensuring that if you have a Linux server, if it doesn't have to be exposed to the internet, that it shouldn't be.